about it. "I thought you were fed up with the Parents' Association, and now you've landed yourself a job like this." "It might be fun," Patty said, still excited because her idea had been agreed by the headmaster, her head still full of plans. "I'm surprised Medburn agreed." "So am I," she said. "You only took it on because you're bored," Jim said. "You should get a job." He was right. With the children both at school, she'd been restless for months. She'd even nagged her husband about moving somewhere a bit more stylish, perhaps to Morpeth or on the coast. But Jim knew she would never leave Heppleburn. Besides, he said, how could they afford to move on a teacher's salary? If she wanted to change, she could go back to work. His mother would mind the bairns when they came out of school. Patty recognised the sense of his suggestion, but knew she would not be satisfied with working as a clerk at the gas board again, and realised she was qualified for nothing else. At 18, she'd left home to go to a teacher training college in Reading, but after a fortnight she was ill with homesickness and came home to her mum and dad in Heppleburn. The experience had made her glad then of the job in the accounts office, the security and the company of the other girls. Now she knew she would hate it. "Oh, if only I had qualifications," she thought, and wondered hopelessly about the Open University, but she realised she would never have the application to complete a degree. During this period of restlessness, she'd paid for evening classes and attended a few sessions, but never finished the course. She'd taken up aerobics, dressmaking, and archery, and launched into each new interest with the conviction that it would meet all her needs. The conviction soon passed. She had been for wild nights out to the clubs in Whitley Bay with friends from her old job, but only woke up with a hangover and the same feeling of dissatisfaction. She had considered having a baby, even in moments of deep depression when the day was empty except for cleaning windows and weeding Jim's beloved garden. She had considered finding a lover. But she knew herself well enough to know that her enthusiasm for these projects would end long before the resulting complications. "Well," she said, looking at Jim through the untidy fringe which irritated him so much, "it'll keep me busy for a few weeks." She had conceived the plan for the Halloween party on the way to the meeting. The church and the school were apart from the village, reached by a steep footpath between hawthorn hedges. The haws were forming, and the leaves were beginning to change colour. Although she was late, Patty stood for a moment in the playground. She came to school every day to bring her children, but she had a sudden memory of her own childhood there, never previously recalled. It was a freezing winter's day, grey and overcast, with flurries of snow, the flakes as small and painful as hail. Her knees and hands had been blue in the bitter wind, which came uninterrupted from the North Sea. Miss Hunt had let them into the classroom early, and they stood around the big, evil-smelling boiler in the corner until their flesh tingled with the unaccustomed warmth. Miss Hunt had been her first teacher, and Patty had loved her passionately. Now she taught Patty's daughter Jennifer, and soon she would retire. The school had been smaller in Patty's day, and so had the village. Its heart had been the main street of solid grey houses with the post office and the Northumberland Arms. There had been the small council estate where her father still lived and she'd been brought up, and the row of miners' welfare cottages where old men coughed and spluttered and smoked themselves to death. The children had fitted easily into two classrooms, the infants in one and the juniors in another. In recent years, the village had grown. Builders had bought the low land near the burn and turned it into the estate where she and Jim lived. It was similar to other estates surrounding other villages all over the country. Most of the homes now had swings in the back garden and a bike in the garage, and the school had expanded into a series of mobile and new classrooms. I was happy in this school, Hattie thought, longing for the contentment of childhood. But she knew that even then she'd been unruly, a fidget, a delinquent. She had never been able to concentrate on schoolwork, but had stared out of the window towards the sea, dreaming of adventure. She had volunteered for the Parents' Association with a rush of enthusiasm when her second child had joined the school, and was already regretting it. The meetings were formal and boring, and the association had none of the power she had imagined. It had been a rush to make a meal for Jim and the children and get to the school in time. 6 o'clock was a most inconvenient time for a committee meeting, but Mr. Medburn had insisted that it was the only time when he and his staff could attend. The committee knew that his object was to be as inconvenient as possible, and had suggested